In the back?
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to welcome everyone. My name is Mark Wiggins. I'll be providing this first breakfast symposium for the Research Collaborative Fund Award, which we received from the Provost, and I'll explain all that to you. Our basic format for these monthly symposium is going to be breakfast, followed by a 30 to 40-minute talk, and then hopefully some good collaborative discussion afterwards. So this morning's talk, and it's going to be research-based because that's really what the purpose of the Provost Award was. But this morning's talk, I'm also going to divide in half. The first half, 9 slides, are going to be really to update everyone. All of you, in some way or another, have been part of the efforts to develop an integrative health or integrative medicine center here at USC. And there's been a lot of work, particularly in the last couple of years, to really lift this thing off the ground. So I want to share with you that history a little bit. And then I'll get into the research part of the talk towards the latter half. So, Freud said, everywhere I go, I find the poet has been there before me. So I thought I'd start with a poem. And this poem, a little short poem by Rumi, kind of spoke to me a little bit about the process we've had in getting an integrative medicine center started. Keep walking, though there's no place to get to. Don't try to see through the distances. That's not for human beings. Move within, but don't move the way fear makes you move. With that, we'll get into the talk. So, first thing I want to do is really define integrative medicine, because you'll see many different definitions out there, and I want to let you know what kind of our working definition has been. One of the definitions is combining conventional Western allopathic medicine with complementary alternative medicine modalities, or CAM modalities. Oh, by the way, this is a glitch too. I can't figure out where that little arrow is coming from, so we'll just have to kind of work our eyes around it. So CAM modalities include mind-body, herbal, body-based, all the things you probably know about. And I kind of picture this this definition as the caduceus here of Mercury with the two snakes, one representing conventional allopathic and one representing CAM modalities around a single staff. But there's another definition which really sees integrative medicine as a medicine for the whole person, it's really person-oriented, really taking into account the whole complexity of a human being, mind, body, and spirit. And this is represented most immediately by the traditional, by the whole system forms of medicine. So Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, some of the indigenous medicine systems. But it also, within our Western model, I think we have a way to think of it in this way, in a real integrated way, and that's by conjunctively using CAM modalities with allopathic. In other words, not going with allopathic until you say, oh, what can we do now? Oh, let's try acupuncture. But really, right from the get-go, making a full body assessment. And so, in place of Mercury's caduceus, I submit to you the staff of Moses or the staff of Asclepius, depending on your bent, where it's a single healing snake climbing up the staff, representing a true integration of all medical health modalities. I want to talk a little bit about the history and really emphasize the history of past activities in getting an integrative center, an integrative health institute going. And I do want to point out that we've labeled this Institute for Integrative Health. Now, institute's a big word here at USC, and right now it's kind of a virtual institute. It's not fully funded, but we want to hold that vision out in front of us, which will then draw us to it as we work towards really something that is a full-blown institute. But it's very important, and I started here with 2005, but I was told before the talk that really these efforts started long before that. But between whenever it started and then, there were many efforts to get started, and it wasn't just a flat line here either. There were really bursts and efforts to get things started, but this is kind of where things were going with the initial mission statement written in 2006. An early website was established. In 2008, there was actually a full-day symposium of integrative medicine researchers here at USC that did a talk, as well as the invited lectureship, and Andy Weil came and spoke to us. And in 2009, efforts kind of stalled, but then in 2010, they kind of picked up, and I really credit the Medical Student Integrative Medicine Club, and some of you are here representing your group, from below, as there are also faculty who are really interested in pulling this thing up from the bootstraps. In 2011, we had actually 2 groups working separately on developing an integrative medicine center. There was a group spearheaded by the oncology group. I want to point out the Boo Tripati and Augustine Garcia, who's here today, who were really heading that effort up. And then another group that were working kind of in continuity, I think, with what some of these earlier efforts. We combined in 2011, and then things really, started to take off really in the last 18 months. I would say there's been a dramatic increase in activities, including getting some clinical space designated to do acupuncture and potentially other integrative medicine modalities, and developing a business plan for clinical care, and getting some research funding, as I mentioned. I do want to acknowledge some of the pioneers who worked down in this end of the curve for their hard work, because they really set the foundation by which we would not have really been able to manifest. So I want to point out Shri Misra, who's here in the front row, and really carried the ball for a long time, along with Sarah Ingersoll, and also Sarah Ingersoll, Department of Neurology. Sarah, from the Office of Religious Life, right next to Sarah. Everyone else here that was in around those days, I apologize for not acknowledging and recognizing you, but consider yourself acknowledged at this point, because really without this pioneering work, we really couldn't have picked up the baton and carried it into this point. So in the last 9 months particularly, I think integrative medicine and the drive for a center here at USC has really been accelerating, and so we're really ready to be born now. So that's why I titled this talk The Birth of Integrative Medicine. It's maybe not quite as dramatic as the goddess of love being born, whole and grown, and a seashell, the shore of the sea, but nonetheless, I think 2 events have happened that have really, we can say, established a foothold for our Integrative Health Institute here. Number 1 was support from the Keck School of Medicine through the Dean of the School of Medicine, Dean Pugliafito, who we've identified some potential clinical space for a center. It's not a guarantee 100% yet, let me tell you. There's still some work to be done, but at least we got our eye on the prize, and we're starting to envision what that might look like. Support for some administrative support that can hold the glue of all our disparate faculty leaders running all over the place together, and also supporting our membership into a national consortium of academic health centers for integrative medicine, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides. And as I mentioned, we were awarded in September the Research Collaborative Fund Award from the Vice President of Research, the Provost's office, Randy Hall. And this is some seed money to really get programs actually started and really start to, get things going. So we're getting out of our heads and onto the ground and really manifesting things. So this is the fund then that is actually supporting these breakfast seminars. We're in the early stages of talking about planning and developing a website so that we have a web presence, because we all know in this day and age, if you don't have a website, you're not really real, right? You need a virtual presence to have a real presence. And we'll be having a more extensive planning retreat for the Institute later in the spring. So I want to share with you, some of you who've been around have seen this slide already. We really envision a trans-school, transdisciplinary center. It would involve schools from the health science campus. There's a number of partner faculty and schools at the University Park campus, and also a number of community partners who we've already engaged with. So this is kind of the long-term vision. This is not a center that's going to be housed in one department or one school alone. And of course, negotiating how that's going to be at a university is a difficult task in and of itself, but nonetheless, we're all kind of unified on board in this. So I want to share with you then, what is the structure at this moment? Where do we exist at this moment? So right now, we have an administrative forum that consists of really an ad hoc steering committee. Myself, Dr. Tripathi already mentioned, Yogi Matharu, who I don't think is here, and Jim Burke. Oh, Yogi, you're here. Wave your hand. In the back from physical therapy, Debu from oncology, and Jim again, Berglow from the Office of Religious Life. Kind of pushing things through so that we just get a start. I want to acknowledge Quintilia Avila, also known as Q, who you all received emails from. Have to re-acknowledge her when she comes back. But she is the glue that's kind of holding it all together. So we envision, again, this, the three parts of the institute will be the clinical part, the education center, and the research center. And these are the facts on the ground. So we have a couple rooms in HCC2 where acupuncture and other services can be delivered. We're talking about this site in the Health Research Association building, right adjacent to the physical therapy group, to be really a center that can deliver all kinds of services. I'll show you more about that in a minute. We have education activities going on, development of curriculum in the medical school, but we have a lot more things looking forward to. And Armady Austin has been kind of leading us at that point. Armady, you want to raise your hand just so people know what you've been doing and working with the medical students? And then I want to focus again then on the research. So the RCF, the Research Collaborative Fund, is what's funding these breakfast seminars. And really our purpose is to develop a collaborative research community. So a community of researchers in integrative medicine that are collaborating, talking about their work, and can really build the field here at USC. There are a couple of active grants right now, funded by NCAM or others. George Salem, who's here. George, where are you? Has an R01 from NCAM, and Shelley Liu as well, and there are other researchers that are doing work in integrative medicine that may be funded by other funding agencies. And in pediatrics, we just submitted to NCAM a proposal for a Center for Excellence in Research in Complementary Alternative Medicine in September, and that'll be reviewed in January. I'll show you a slide on that later. So the steering committee for the RCF, again, which is what this talk is representing, it really consists of the people who helped to write the application for that fund. But I want to say to everybody here that we're really seeking active involvement at this point. These two groups maybe have spearheaded these couple activities that got us on the map, but we really need to build from the ground up. So you'll have a survey on your table there. We're really at a point where we need other people who are interested in integrative medicine to really come in and help us go further. Quick slide about what is available in terms of what we could consider integrative health already at USC. Even if in the past it wasn't considered integrative health, we can consider these integrative health services. So the Department of Occupational Therapy has a lot of programs that really involve what we would call attention on the whole person, focusing on mind, body, and spirit. Physical therapy as well. Cancer programs at the Norris Cancer Center and a few programs in our pediatric department as well. There are several services that are currently in creation and discussion. Acupuncture again, Division of Oncology predominantly, art therapy, and some others. And then the future is really to have a full gamut of integrative medicine services that would be very active at this medical and health science campus as well. So I said I would show you, this is our vision of the HRA space if we end up getting that space. So I think I underestimated, I think it's around 3,000 square feet, but it's currently occupied by physical therapy, and we're talking with them, and they're going to move to another site. This is at this manifest, and I must say, if this space doesn't happen, it's going to happen somewhere. But, individual treatment rooms, a couple of good group spaces for group encounters, some good space for yoga or dance classes, a library resource center, some academic and educational areas in the back. And then the Center for Education, that was clinical, this is education. Armady Austin, again, has developed a second-year selective, which is currently in its second year, right, Armady? And is currently working on a curriculum for a fourth-year selective, so the fourth-year medical students who really have an interest in integrative medicine, integrative health, can really start to focus on that interest. The Education Center will also be looking forward to developing conference activities, both here at USC and inviting community members, developing curricula for other professional schools. For instance, Georgetown actually has a master's program in integrative health. So this is something that we see kind of on the horizon, and even postgraduate training programs that may involve other fields beyond typical quote-unquote health fields. For instance, in the School of Cinema Arts, they're interested in a program where people who have gotten their MFA could then go and do practical projects in integrative health using film and that sort of stuff towards health. So this is all very exciting stuff. And finally, I think one of the last slides before I get to the research side of the talk, I want to talk about the Consortium of Academic Health Centers for Integrative Medicine. So this is a national consortium of all academic health, any academic health center in the country that has joined together to start to share resources and share experiences. So its mission is to advance principles of integrative health, and in order to belong, an academic health center has to have activities in 2 of the 3 areas that I just described to you: clinical, research, and education. So how many members are there? It started with 8, and here are the members. The initial 8 included 2 from California, Duke, Harvard. So you see these are major research institutions in the country, and you can see that now in 2012 it's up to 54. And notice who is one of the last to join. Just last month we were given accepted into membership of the consortium. This is where they're located, and USC isn't there. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, good. So there we are. Okay, so we are now present on the national scene. And last month I went and attended the consortium meeting. It was very exciting. We were welcomed in. This gives us access to their website. Gives you lots of resources. We'll be sharing that information as it develops. You know, all this stuff is happening so fast, it's kind of hard to keep up. But this will be a fantastic resource for us, and already has been moving forward. The other thing that happened is following the consortium meeting in October was a 3-day meeting, first ever of its kind, for educators in integrative health and medicine. And Armity attended that meeting and brought back lots of valuable information for our developing our education center. Okay, so now from this point I shift. Does anyone have any quick questions or comments? I'll entertain maybe 2 before we go on, because I want to hold most of them till the end so we can really have a hopefully vibrant discussion at the end. That's kind of where we are at this point. And the talk now shifts into what the format will be for these talks, these Research Collaborative Foundation talks, or talks, which will really be presenting research by USC researchers in integrative health and medicine. Okay, so we got our Research Collaborative Fund Award. Breakfast seminars that you're at here is one of the primary activities. Every month we'll be going. The next one will be in December. We're planning a 2-day retreat to really sit down and further manifest the Fuller Institute for Integrative Health. We're currently in planning stages for a website. The all-day symposium, which was going to be held, we plan to hold at USC at the end of the month, or end of the year, I'm sorry, may or may not, we may have to move that into the summer, but we'll see. And then all you researchers in the room should certainly be aware that the NCAM RFA for Centers for Excellence in Research in CAM Medicine has 3 years where they'll be accepting applications. So look at next September for the deadline to put forward another cert submission if you're interested in that. So what is the role of these breakfast seminars? Again, I've talked about some of this, but really to build collaborations among those of us who are doing research here at USC and CHLA. I see Justin smiling. The process is going to be a 30-minute networking breakfast. Some of us have called this the schmear and schmooze, because we'll have bagels and cream cheese, etc. So, but you can see there's quite a variety of things to eat. The 30-minute presentation of an investigative research, and then 20 or 30 minutes discussion afterwards. So I want to present some of my research at this point that has to do with the field of integrative health, and it really has to do with the role of chronic psychosocial stress in obesity-related disease among obese and overweight adolescents. So most of this work has been done here at the Center for Obesity Research, right in this building around the corner, in collaboration with Michael Gordon and the Obesity Research Group there. So chronic stress has been proposed to promote insulin resistance and obesity-related insulin-resistant obesity disease through 2 primary pathways. One is that when people are stressed, they tend to alter their eating behaviors. It promotes emotional eating, stress-related eating, boredom eating, and an increase. When people are eating for emotional reasons, they tend to take in those comfort foods that are very increased in calorie-dense foods. This leads to general adiposity, increase in body fat, which will promote insulin resistance. But the other side, as a pediatric endocrinologist that I'm interested in, is that chronic stress may directly affect the stress response in our body, which consists of autonomic nervous system and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis activation, leading to subtle degrees of hypercortisolism, cortisol being the stress hormone secreted when the HPA axis is activated. And we know that increases in cortisol will promote visceral adiposity, which then in turn promotes insulin resistance. So the underlying question in some of the data that I'm going to show you now is, well, two questions. First of all, is this system active in obese adolescents, and particularly obese Latino and other minority adolescents? Is question number one. And number two is, if you block the chronic stress response, in other words, if using integrative health modalities you can reduce stress, will you then reduce disease risk through these mechanisms? So I'm going to present to you some of our preliminary data that hopefully will be beginning to answer a couple of these questions. So our first foray in this regard was a paper we published in JCEM in 2008, which showed that among obese Latino youth, overweight and obese Latino youth, these were kids who were 8 to 13 years old, who had metabolic syndrome. Now, if you don't know the metabolic field, metabolic syndrome is defined as 3 of these 5 features. So an increased waist circumference, central adiposity, high blood pressure, hyperglycemia, not always diabetes, it can be impaired glucose tolerance or prediabetes, low HDL cholesterol, and high triglycerides, so dyslipidemia. So if you have any 3 of those 5 features, you can diagnose the metabolic syndrome in that patient. So we had obese kids, and we had some who had metabolic syndrome in the black bars, and some who were obese but did not have metabolic syndrome in the white bars. And after adjusting for the degree of obesity, we showed that in a total sample, serum cortisol was significantly higher than it was in the kids who had metabolic syndrome than in those who didn't. This was significantly true, still significant in males. In females, this p-value was around 0.06. So those obese youth with metabolic syndrome seem to have an increase in circulating cortisol in the morning. This was simply a morning serum cortisol measure. And in fact, there was a pretty good dose response, so that the more features, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of metabolic syndrome you had, the higher was the serum cortisol, kind of in a nice stepwise dose response. The next piece of evidence that this activated HPA axis may lead to insulin-resistant related disease came from a paper published by Tanya Adam, who was a postdoc with Dr. Gorin. This came out a couple of years ago, and what Tanya showed was that baseline morning cortisol predicted a decline in insulin sensitivity. So the y-axis here is a change in insulin sensitivity over a year's time with cortisol measured at baseline. Okay? So what you see is that the higher the serum cortisol was, after a year, the more reduced was insulin sensitivity after a year. So in other words, kids with higher serum cortisol at baseline had more insulin resistance a year later, suggesting that an activation of the HPA axis as measured by serum cortisol would predict worsening insulin resistance in the future, and therefore presumably more disease risk. These are more recent data. This is a paper that's actually in review right now. We're actually about to resubmit it. It asks for some revisions. And these are data from Claudia Toledo-Corral, who's sitting right over here. Claudia, very good. So we looked at the diurnal pattern of salivary cortisol. Now, most of the people doing neuroendocrine work are now measuring cortisol in the saliva because it correlates much stronger with circulating free cortisol. So, and it's a circulating free cortisol that is really bioactive. Much cortisol that's circulating in the blood is bound by proteins, and this cortisol can't get into the target tissue to act, whereas free cortisol rapidly diffuses into the target tissue, binds to its receptor, and activates DNA transcription and translation of gene products. So insofar as salivary cortisol is readily available with non-invasive measures, you just put a cotton pledget in somebody's mouth and let the spit get soaked up for a minute or so, spit it, and you can assay the cortisol in the saliva. So we know, we looked at the question of whether, the diurnal salivary cortisol pattern, whether there was alterations in that pattern could lead to disease risk. And specifically, Claudia did her PhD work on risk for subclinical atherosclerotic disease as measured by carotid artery intima media thickness. We're going to show you that data in a minute. So she was interested in whether this diurnal pattern, which consists of cortisol typically here in the dotted line, is lowest in the late evening and nighttime, and then through the early morning hours during sleep rises to awakening. We woke the kids up here at 5:30 in the morning. And then in the first half hour after awakening, there's what's called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. Okay? And so we were asking the question really, is disease risk related to either the NCR, or nocturnal cortisol rise, or is it related to the CAR, or is it related to both, or is it related to individual cortisol levels? And we looked at all of this. But to cut the story to the chase, we're going to find that NCR, or this nocturnal cortisol rise, seemed to portend disease risk. So that basically we divided the group into tertiles, those who had a blunted or low nocturnal cortisol rise shown here, those who had a high nocturnal cortisol rise, and then there was the middle tertile. And then we asked whether those groups showed different degrees of carotid artery intima media thickness. Again, sort of the gold standard measure of incipient cardiovascular disease, or some clinical cardiovascular disease. And indeed what we found was that carotid intima media thickness was highest in the group that had lowest nocturnal cortisol rise, so a blunted nocturnal cortisol pattern. And this is very, and again, you can see a stepwise decrease, so that the group with the high pattern, just go back for a moment, this group had the lowest intima media thickness, and therefore presumably the less risk of future atherosclerotic disease. This goes along with other researchers who have shown that a blunted diurnal pattern of cortisol actually portends disease risk. All right, and it's kind of interesting and perhaps counterintuitive, but what's been shown is that chronic stress, such as chronic PTSD, overwork at work, like burned out school teachers, have an increase in disease, various forms of disease risk, if their diurnal cortisol pattern has been suppressed and blunted down. So this finding is really consistent with other researchers' finding, and indeed in the adult cardiology world, a blunted 24-hour cortisol pattern has been shown to be related to overt cardiovascular disease, actual MI events and things like that. So these data again support that first question: is activation of the ACPA, or abnormalities of the ACPA at least, related to insulin-resistant disease risk? And we think we have enough preliminary evidence from these studies to suggest it probably does, and to go on to try to answer the second question, which is that, okay, then if you reduce chronic psychosocial stress through mind-body modalities, using integrated health modalities, can you then reduce chronic disease risk that comes with obesity and insulin resistance? So this prompted the Imagine Health study, health standing for Healthy Eating, Active Living, Total Health, which was a pilot study funded by NCAM under an R21 mechanism. We did a lifestyle intervention using interactive guided imagery, which I'll describe to you in a minute, to try to improve physical activity, eating behaviors, and reducing cortisol. It showed some trends in reducing caloric intake, but beyond that, we didn't get a significant response in eating behaviors. So I'm going to focus on the physical activity outcomes and the cortisol outcomes. So this was a study design. We had obese Latino adolescents. These kids were 14 to 17 years old, 90th percentile for BMI or greater. They were randomized into two groups. The intervention group received a lifestyle didactic education class in a classroom setting. How to eat healthier, how to be more physically active. And they also received 12, this was a 12-week intervention. They also received 12 individual sessions of interactive guided imagery, which I'll describe in the next slide. Whereas the quote-unquote control group, which wasn't a real non-treatment control group, by the way, and I just want to point that out, because they did receive the lifestyle education, and they also received a digital storytelling intervention, really to compensate for the time we were spending with the kids, giving them interactive guided imagery. The digital storytelling was they would meet with a staff member and create a digital story using iMovie on a Macintosh, pulling in different digital images and creating a story with that. So we thought that was a good control to guided imagery because it used imagery, it used images, but it had nothing to do with health. They had to put together a story that was not health related. Okay, so why guided imagery, and maybe for some of you, what is guided imagery? So I want to say that guided imagery is a complementary alternative medicine mind-body modality which involves a generation of mental images, and these images in the mind could be either sensory or affective, so even generating emotional, quote-unquote, images, if you will, is part of the process, leading to a specific health outcome. In our case, one of the ways we used it was to reduce stress, as I mentioned. It's been shown to be effective in both children and adults in a variety of disease states. And very important for our study design, it's been shown to be able to transform health behaviors, specifically eating behaviors, in women with bulimia by actually changing the meaning of that eating behavior. So where binging and purging had the meaning for these women with bulimia of bringing comfort and control into their lives, the guided imagery that was done in this study was able to shift that so that binging and purging no longer held that meaning, and they actually stopped binging and purging. So we thought this was an interesting thing to look at. So the way we do interactive guided imagery is shown here. I apologize for the somewhat fuzzy slide, but here's one of our skilled imagery facilitators. Here's a kid who's imagining this beautiful sunset. It's very nice and relaxed and mellowed out. And, oops, I'm sorry. Way ahead. And what's important in interactive guided imagery is that it's not a generic image. We don't say, imagine a beautiful sunset. Because for all I know, this kid is afraid of sunsets, right? And then you would not be reducing stress in a kid. But interactive imagery actually invites an image that represents just comfort and relaxation to the individual subject. And then the facilitator can actually guide the subject through that image for about a 20-minute session, okay? The overall session lasts 45 minutes. You spend a few minutes talking to the kid about what you're going to do, and then you do it, and then you spend a few minutes talking about what you just did, and for them to glean some insight and understanding of what their images might have meant for them. So the theory, again, underlying conceptual model for this was that by using guided imagery to reduce stress, we would lower cortisol, and by changing meanings of physical activity in eating, we would improve eating and physical activity behaviors, and all of this then would result in lowered immune resistance. So, I want to take a minute because I find when I talk about guided imagery and stress reduction, it's really hard to get. So, we've all just been through a marathon of a national election. It was really stressful, no matter which side you're on. So, I want to take 2 minutes and just invite you to close your eyes. Or if you're not comfortable with that, just dim your focus and look straight out ahead in front of you without a focus gaze. And just focus on your breath for a minute and let yourself experience what a facilitated guided imagery session would be like. So I'd like you to close your eyes and begin by just focusing on your breath. Let all other thoughts kind of just fly out of your mind. Focus on your breath, breathing in, oxygen and comfort. Breathing out any stress, tension you'll need for the next 2 minutes of this exercise. Focusing just on your breath, noticing the pattern of your breathing, which we don't take enough time to do. In-breath bringing oxygen, cool and comfort. You might notice that the in-breath is cool as it comes in through your nostrils. The out-breath is warm as if it's taking away the heat and stress that we don't need right now. In, breathing out, each breath more relaxing than before. And if other thoughts come in, or you hear noises from the outside, or even from this room you become aware of, because our minds never quite stop working, then just let that thought go, recognize it, and just let it go with the next out breath. Just kind of blow it away. Maybe scan your body with the next breath or two. Is there any area of tension or muscle tension that needs a little relief? Direct the breath right to that area. Let the oxygen just kind of wash it away. And breathe away that tension with the out breath. Breathing in, breathing out. More relaxing breath before. For the sake of time, we'll have to this exercise. If you're ready in the next breath or two, Gently return to this room. Notice the chair against your back. Gently open your eyes. Be present here right now. Just a show of hands, how many just by doing that feel a little more relaxed than they did 4 or 5 minutes ago? And how many feel more stressed out than they did 4 or 5 minutes ago? There's always one joker in the room. No, seriously, it is possible. I mean, it is possible. So that's why it's important that you keep track of your subject as you're working it on. How many didn't notice a change, by the way? There's another option. Okay, that was only a beginning. I mean, you know, I didn't take you through a 20-minute session of imagining a place that represents discomfort and relaxation to you, and let's go explore that place. But when we did so, whoops, I'm sorry, I'm pushing buttons. Oops. Yeah, here's what would happen to your salivary cortisol if we did that for 20 minutes. So in these kids, we showed that in the first 3 sessions of our 12 weeks of guided imagery, each session they got a significant acute reduction in salivary cortisol relative to the group that did not get guided imagery. Okay, and this was about a 38, almost 40% reduction in salivary cortisol. And in terms of physical activity, we saw a decrease in leisure sedentary behavior in the group that got guided imagery. Now this is after 12 weeks of the intervention. The first slide I showed you was individual sessions, cortisol response. So after 12 weeks of an intervention where the kids either got guided imagery for 12 weeks or got that digital storytelling in the white, guided imagery in the black, you can see a reduction which was significant relative to the digital storytelling group, which actually went up in leisure sedentary activity. Also a significant increase in moderate physical activity, not a lot of change in more vigorous physical activity. So they were less couch potato-y, if you would. Now exactly how we did that at this point we don't know. What was it that shifted? And that's actually the subject of our one of our projects that went into NCAM. So this preliminary data and other preliminary data has led to our submission for the NCAM CERC, Center of Excellence in Research, and in which we are proposing integrative pediatrics approach to prevent and treat obesity in Latino youth. So Project 1 is led by PI Dr. Donna Sprout-Metz, who's in the back, from medicine. And Donna's going to be looking at with really cool cell phone technology, mobile measures. I mean, I don't understand it, but it's really cool. Looking at the path of stress, the interaction of stress, diet, and activity in real time for kids. All right, we're limited right now in how we measure stress in kids, both the surveys and biomeasures. And so Donna is proposing that these real-time measures using cell phones, accelerometers, and other technology can really give us new biomarkers for which kids are stressed in which part. It would seem that that's not a hard question to answer, but in fact it's a really hard question to answer, and it's a big problem with the stress research field. So she'll be measuring this and seeing, oh well, these kids are going through high school, which is a stressful time, and our hypothesis is that over 4 years of high school, we may see a decompensation in metabolic health over those 4 years. And so Donna's going to track that longitudinally over 4 years. Second project is I'm the PI, and that really will further the findings I just showed you in the Imagine Health pilot study with a much larger study where we're really powered to measure insulin resistance. That first study that I showed you, we saw actually a little bit of a reduction in insulin resistance in both groups, but not a between-group difference, and it just wasn't powered for that. So this study will be adequately powered. We hope to detect that, certainly to detect physical activity and cortisol changes. And the third project, which is led by Jeffrey Gold in the back at Children's Hospital, will be a clinic-based intervention using virtual reality, augmented guided imagery. This is really wild stuff, using goggles for virtual reality and stuff like that, or acupuncture in reducing obesity-related diabetes risk and insulin-resistant disease risk. And by the way, my project will be school-based. So this has been submitted in September, I think, and will be reviewed in January. So hopefully be funded and now help our Integrative Health Institute's research are really being run. So I'm going to close. This slide used to introduce my talks on integrative medicine, but now, just think about what all of these leading institutions across the center have in common, and that is that they have an integrated health center. And who isn't missing anymore but us? Okay, so we're very proud of the steps we've been able to make. And finally, before I close, again, I want to make a plea for your involvement. If you're interested in seeing our Institute for Integrative Health really develop its full potential, we encourage, solicit, request, beg for your involvement if you're so moved. So you have a survey in front of you. We ask that you fill out what groups you might be interested in working on our clinical side, whether you're interested in really taking leadership role in the steering committee, working on clinic, research, or education. There's also going to be a lot of activities with the consortium that I mentioned, the national consortium. They have working groups also in all of the areas I mentioned. And I highlight this one because if there's anybody in the room here who is really into health policy, and especially with the results of the election last night, it's pretty secure that the ACA, Obamacare is here to stay. Now, each state can decide what is covered under Obamacare. And right now, at this very moment, the state of California's insurance commissioner and Medicaid people are deciding which health procedures and interventions will be covered by insurance, by insurance in the state of California. So that can include acupuncture, guided imagery, yoga, meditation, etc., etc. But now is the time for us to really engage the policymakers on a state level. And Dr. Margaret Chesney, who's the head of the Osher Integrative Medicine Institute at UCSF, one of the founders of the consortium, 1999 institutions, and she's also former head of NCAM, is just 2 days ago sent an email to consortium members to form a policy group to work at the state level. So if any of you are really go-getters in terms of policy, we really need somebody representing USC to be on that committee and really help to bring integrative medicine to the front. Because this is a critical thing. If integrative medicine services are not reimbursable, then it's very hard to build a sustainable practice model for those of us who are involved in the healing world of integrative health. Okay? So I thank you for your attention, and I open it up for questions, discussion. Hopefully we can get the ball bouncing around. Whatever I left out, I'd love to hear from you and whatever you have comments on. So thank you very much. Yes?
I'm Katie from Occupational Therapy, and we use salivary cortisol in well-elderly, the second well-elderly, to look at how preventative OT lifestyle redesign would impact cortisol levels and our ability to manage stress better. And one of the things we struggle with was sustainability. And so I'm wondering if on the follow-up, or in the pilot, if you have any follow-up to see if those gains were sustained, or if in the new projects that's part of your plan.
Great question. We did not have funding to do long-term follow-up. It is worked into the new proposal, so we'll be doing, we're proposing to do short-term outcomes right at the completion of a essentially 12, 13-week intervention, and then 9 months later. So that we'll get, because truly, I mean, it's a really good point, because essentially all obesity interventions in kids at least really haven't shown benefit for significant weight loss and or insulin resistance until they've been followed for a minimum of 6 months, and typically more like 12 months. So we'll be getting measured, I think, at 3 months and at 9 months is what we decided to do, and we decided on that based on just the logistics of the school year and when we would have them do those measurements. Can I ask you a question, which is where are you currently measuring your salivary cortisol and what assay are you using? Do you know?
I actually don't know because I'm not working on the study, but I just was on some of the teams that were talking about the barriers, and I don't know. I know we were sending it out somewhere, but I don't know exactly what they're looking at.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking is because the Diabetes and Obesity Research Institute that just came together about 6 months ago, Joyce Ritchie is leading their laboratory, and she's the head of our measurement court in this service submission, and we'll be doing the cortisol assay there. We also have another place to do it on campus, which is Tom Wright. Tom, are you still here?
No, the last.
Tom is the director of the CPU laboratory, and all of these salivary cortisol data that I showed you were assayed by Tom in the CPU lab. We developed and validated a salivary cortisol assay. So that's kind of a homegrown assay. I would say that most stress researchers are using the salometrics assay. That's probably where you're sending your samples, because everybody's doing that. And that is the assay that Joyce will be using in the Dory laboratory. And when we get funded, that's what we'll be doing our measures as well.
Well, one of the comments I'd like to make, Mike, about your presentation, and also something applicable to the whole institute, is it would be great if we could start to harmonize and develop some consistency among the measures that we obtain, especially in projects that would cut across different areas. I was just invited to submit a project for the Komen Foundation after we submitted a letter to look at metabolomics in breast cancer survivors. And we're looking at the impact of things like aspirin, metformin, beta blockers, all of which have preliminary evidence of lowering the risk of recurrence. And for some of these, we'd like to probably work with the core to develop some of these metrics. And then also when it comes to other outcomes tools, the NCI has put a big effort into patient-related outcomes, PROs. And again, that's an area where our center can develop a set of tools that we think should be used across the research studies in our institute so that we can start to look at things across different areas. The stress reduction is something that applies in, obesity and endocrinology. It probably applies to cardiovascular medicine, neurology, and cancer as well. And we should be thinking about harmonizing our results. So one of the things we can bring to the research community is to develop some sort of clearinghouse to do this.
Now, it's a really important comment, and I would just add to that really is on the agenda or target for the field of integrative medicine in general. When the consortium had their first research conference, which was in Portland in May, and I went, and they had speakers from NCAM and DHS and stuff, and so trying to develop common outcome measures. For instance, the NIH has developed the PROMISE outcomes, which are a lot of psychosocial surveys. So where it's conceivable and possible to utilize those measures, we're really trying to say to people, hey, as much as you can, if it's relevant to your research, try to use these measures so that we can start to compare outcomes research that's being done at different institutions and with different interventions, so that at least we're measuring the same outcomes and can do some sort of comparisons. Because right now, every PI chooses a different survey and chooses a different modality, and that certainly is our prerogative. You have to choose the outcome that you think will best lead to your result. But insofar as it may be possible to develop a common core of outcomes that really can service all researchers, I think that is an important role that we can play in the Institute of Integrative Health for our local community, as well as connecting to the greater community out there in that way. The other thing I would say is a comment which is about stress reduction overall, is that you'll notice that we're including under the umbrella of integrative health, what some of you might say, well, that's conventional medicine, physical activity, eating. Of course, doctors talk about that, but I think the mindset, when you think of it in terms of integrative health, is a little different. To me, anyway, there's basically a foundation of integrative health where with any patient, for any reason, you talk about nutrition, you talk about physical activity, you talk about stress reduction, and you talk about sleep. Those are like the 4 pillars of good health, I think, of health and well-being. And then from there, you can start to talk about, okay, what kind of other, interventions, may work, be it acupuncture, be it whatever, be it aspirin, be it, standard chemotherapeutic agents, whatever, But that foundation really has to be present. And I would say, as trained in the allopathic tradition, and even in the nutrition-related field of diabetes, certainly my medical school education was deficient in nutrition and physical activity training. My residency was deficient. My fellowship training was deficient. So, I think we really got to put those things foundational because they're really relevant to any of us in any field. All right, so before we go, I again want to acknowledge, because she stepped out of the room, the role of Q. He feels really coordinated this and is coordinating really all the activities of our efforts towards building this integrative health institute. So thank you, Q. Thank you to those members of the steering committee and exec committee that have really worked hard with all of those pioneers again who held the torch and have helped us to push through, and anyone else who really is wanting to be involved in any way, shape, or form, be it just coming and being present and learning more at these talks, or really taking a leadership role. We welcome you all and everybody's involvement. Thank you. Want to make an announcement for the next one?
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to let Q have the last word, which is a couple of housekeeping things.
So good morning. Thank you, Mark. So my name is Q, and also people call me Q, or I'm known as Q. So I wanted to let you know that I'm the person who you will be receiving the emails for future announcements or other activities or other developments. And I wanted to give you a heads up of some dates that we have already scheduled for the future monthly breakfast seminars. This is our first one today. Is our initiation, as Mark said, the research collaboration from activities. So next month, Marisa Perdomo from Physical Therapy will be speaking on Tuesday, December 11th, on this campus in the CHP building. That's 1540 Alcazar Street and CHP 101. Okay. They will all be, thank you, they'll all be at 7:30. So 7:30 to 8 will be the breakfast seminar. I know it's ungodly time today.
Bunch of doctors organized this.
The seminar is supposed to be from 8 to about 8:30, 8:45, and we want to allow time for discussion and collaboration. We don't have the January date, but I wanted to really give you a heads up because the next one will be at Children's Hospital, and I will be sending out an address, and I'll need a map from you, Jeffrey. But it will be February 6th, it's a Wednesday, at Children's Hospital. And just so you know, in March, it will be at the University Park campus with Barbara Musoni, who will be hosting, and Jim Burkle will be hosting. April, we'll have Debu, and April 2nd. And May, George Salem, May 9th, at, again, this campus, CHP 101. I will be sending out future emails about those dates, but if you want to put them in your calendar now, I welcome you to do that. Thank you again.
Plenty of food left, so
Please take some.
Please fill out your survey.
Please fill out your survey.